there. Welcome to another edition of Talk Stocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to have Jon Bey, CEO of Standard Uranium, with us. Hey, Jon, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Keir, for having me on the show.
Hey, thanks very much for accepting the invitation. We've been looking to cover a little bit more on the uranium side. You've got a very interesting company, so why don't we sort of dig in here? Maybe we could start with yourself. Could you share us a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are today, what sort of skills and experiences you've got sort of in the mining and finance side of things?
Yeah, for sure. So look, I came out of university. I thought I was going to be a professional hockey player. That didn't work out for me. So I had to go into the business world. And I started off, with an education degree and a kinesiology degree. And I ended up teaching high school right out of university. I did that for about 10 years, picked up a lot of great communication and people skills and teaching skills, of course. And then when I made the decision to transition into the business world around 2005, I went right into a tech company in Vancouver. It was booming at that time, and I got brought in by a friend of mine to ask me to sort of help him out on the investor relations side. So I started learning that side of the business. And then as we got into 2006, the mining industry in Vancouver was crushing it. So everyone I talked to was in mining downtown. So I quickly got recruited into the mining industry around 2006, 2007. Started working for a group of companies called the Hamilton Resource Group, and they had gold, silver, copper, uranium, some oil and gas stuff in there. So I sort of got my feet dipped into all those different sectors. I mean, then we went through the uranium spike that happened the first time around, and one of the groups in our company was Forum Uranium. They had a wonderful success during that period. So I really saw, wow, when uranium moves, it really moves. So fast forward, 2010, I left that, started my own investor relations firm called Steel Rose Capital and Steel Rose Communications. I did that for a number of years, sort of working with a number of companies in the mining space, the oil and gas space, some in the tech space, some in the cannabis space. I spent 6 or 7 years in oil and gas, mostly in the Middle East, working in Syria with a company called Gulf Sands Petroleum. And then I got drawn back into the mining space in 2017 when that same individual that brought me into the tech space back in 2005 approached me and asked if I was interested in uranium. And, 2017, end of 2017, the market for uranium was brutal. It had been beaten up for, a number of years after Fukushima. But, I really liked the uranium space back in the day. So I did some diligence, spent a few months really going through the models and sort of had the idea that, I think uranium and the nuclear space is really going to take off again in the future. It might take 2 or 3 years. So we founded Standard Uranium. This individual introduced me to a fellow named Jody Gerouge. Jody Gerouge is an extremely well-known geologist out of Alberta, known in the lithium and the uranium and multiple sectors. Jody had this project called the Davidson River Project, which was sitting right beside Fission's Triple R and NextGen's Aero deposits. So a wonderful land package. There's a whole story around how we got that and the history behind that, which we won't get into today because that's quite a colorful story going back into time. But look, we love that project. So we started Standard Uranium around the Davidson River Project. Now, that took us into 2018. The goal was, 2 or 3 years before the markets were going to move again. So we started to build the company. We stayed private for the first 2 years, and then we took the company public in 2020. And from there, we started to add additional team members, stake different projects, all still before the market took off. So it was a beautiful time to be acquiring good projects in the Athabasca Basin before this massive land rush was occurring, which is occurring right now. So it gave us, a head start on the industry that's flocking into the uranium space right now.
Hey, great. Thank you for the overview there. Jody's done very well for himself on the geological sides, quite famous and well known. So good that you guys have crossed paths here with one of your flagship projects. We'll jump into that in a little bit, but maybe we could just kind of cover off a bit of the sort of industry outlook. Obviously, with what happened at COP28 here recently, and as we're looking for, the globe sort of looking to push towards cleaner sources of energy. And it looks like nuclear is finally being embraced. A lot of Western governments that were initially apprehensive, especially with what happened with Fukushima, they've definitely softened their stance on it and are now sort of, wholeheartedly embracing it. Maybe you could kind of touch on that. From an ultimate insider, somebody who's running a multiple-pronged uranium exploration company. and you sort of got involved when it was not, wasn't the most popular, popular segment of the resource sector. What have you sort of found in terms of that sort of industry outlook and the push to nuclear?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot to unpack there. So let's start off with the global outlook. So right now, I could say, since I've been in the industry, I've never seen it as bullish as it is today. And it's not just on the uranium exploration side, it's on the global scale of people pushing towards clean energy. So look, everyone in the world is now saying we want to get away from carbon sources. We want to go to clean energy. So you've got a few options. You can look at wind and you can look at solar. You can look at hydro and you can look at nuclear. So I think, for 4 or 5 years, I was, getting inbound negative comments from various people saying, oh, nuclear is too expensive. Oh, nuclear takes too long to build. Or look at Fukushima, look at the natural disasters, look at all these issues and look at the nuclear spent waste, like all these problems. Well, all those problems have been solved and they've been fixed, and the nuclear industry needs to do a better job of explaining that and getting that story out to people. And reality is, nuclear industry is extremely safe. It's not that expensive when you look at the length of these reactor lives, man. I mean, some of these ones were built to go 40 years. Now they're getting extensions of 60 to 80 to 100 years. And when these things are built properly and designed safely, they can last a long, long time, bringing the overall lifespan of that industry cost way, way down. You're also seeing these reactors, you look at the US, they built one reactor in 40 years. So of course the cost was staggering and cost overruns and time delays. But look at other parts of the world where they're building multiple reactors year after year, specifically China, where they're building over 10 reactors a year every year for the next 10 to 15 years. Their costs have come way down. They're developing them and getting them built on time when they're plugging them into the grid. And we've never seen a period in history where we've had so many reactors in use and planned and coming. So look, the future demand for nuclear and uranium is just phenomenal. And the supply is not there to meet it. It's not there today. It's not there for the next number of years because there's not enough uranium coming out of the ground. So that can only mean one thing: the price has to go up. These nuclear reactors and nuclear utilities who buy the fuel for those reactors, the cost of the actual uranium is so small compared to the cost of running that reactor, they can't run out. So what's going to happen? We need to fast track more exploration. You have to find more uranium and we need to get it into production. And as we've talked about offline, look, in Canada, it's tough to get a uranium mine built. These things take decades sometimes to find it, get it built and put it into production. But we are seeing that happen right now. We're seeing NextGen Energy get their Arrow deposit moved forward. We're going to see a mine and a mill built there. We're going to be extracting uranium from Saskatchewan in this decade, hopefully. So that's really exciting. And once you get one going and we see how good it can work, there'll be more to come.
Yeah, great. You kind of touched on, something there in terms of some of the major producers. They've actually not been able to sort of meet production guidance. So there's not as many pounds as what was sort of predicted would be produced. Mm-hmm. And yet we've obviously got more interest and more demand growing based upon countries now turning and looking at making nuclear a part of their sort of baseload power. Their push for cleaner, non-carbon sources of energy. So I would imagine that's going to be very bullish for exploration. And is that something that you're kind of seeing in terms of like what's been going on even just this year? I guess both Cameco and Cameco, I guess, recently came out and indicated they're not going to be able to meet 2024 sort of guidance. So is that causing a little bit of a panic almost in terms of having to fast track or put more expenditure and more investment into the exploration side?
That's a really good question. And yeah, both Kazatomprom in Kazakhstan and Cameco, had guidance saying that they're going to be a little bit below what they expected. And that's not a surprise to many people in the industry. It's not that easy to keep these things producing at the levels that they thought they would. And Kazatomprom, people could see for a couple of years in advance they weren't putting the money into the ground to keep those processes going. So they thought they were going to be a little under their numbers, and they are. So look, is it going to fast track what we're doing in exploration? I sure hope so, but we haven't seen it yet. I mean, reality is the money has to start flowing to those junior exploration companies, and we aren't seeing it coming yet. So if you look across, I guess you could say even the Athabasca Basin, or even globally, we're starting to see a real spike now in the demand and the excitement around nuclear and exploration. We're seeing, the price of spot uranium going right up to the top of over $100 from 50 in less than 6 months, which is staggering. But we aren't seeing the junior exploration companies. Those are the ones, sub 50 million or sub 100 million. Their share prices haven't really taken off yet. They've been sort of flatlining, and that's gonna come. So that's something we can look forward to. The companies like the Chemicos and the Oranos and maybe the near term producers, the next gens, their share prices have moved up nicely with the spot moving up, but the junior ones haven't got that kick yet. And those are the ones that need the money to go explore. So that's something that we need to see happen. We need to see more money coming into the junior exploration side to get more projects moved along. And it's one of the reasons that we sort of shifted, and we'll get into this, from a pure exploration play to a project generator. That's allowing us to drive our own cash flow coming in to move some of our projects forward and not have to rely on the capital markets to go back and do raise to continue our exploration.
Well, it's a good segue. Maybe we could get into Standard Uranium. Why don't you start with giving us a bit of an overview of the company? You mentioned it's a project generator. Can you sort of explain how the model works, how many projects you've got?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So when we started the company back in the end of 2017, we built it on one company, Davidson River. Since that time, we've started to acquire more and more projects, all through staking. So we staked our Sundog project up in the north near Uranium City, and then we went to the Eastern Basin and we staked 3 more projects, Canary, Ascent, and Atlantic. And then we've taken up 2 more in the southeast called Rocus and Corvo. And then we've added 3 or 4 more projects in the last couple of months here. Now, each of those projects, they take money to advance them and to explore. So for us, we got to a point about a year ago where we were looking at our model, and we've been going back to the capital markets every 6 months, raising money to continue exploring. And we thought, we got to really rethink this. The capital markets are not the best place right now to be raising money for junior exploration. So we've got to find a way to bring capital in, continue to explore, and really give our shareholders a shot at more than one program and get more and more drilling happening. So we looked at the market. We have we know our peers out there, the Sky Harbors, the Canalaskas, the F3s. These companies are also doing that, the sort of hybrid model, where they're JVing some of their projects, but running some of them themselves. And that's what we want to do. We want to actually, look after our flagship, our Davidson River ourselves. We'll fund that ourselves and do the exploration there. But the other projects we've done, we've moved to the project generator, where we'll bring in a JV partner to fund the exploration, where they'll spend money in the ground. They'll pay us cash and shares and actually pay us to operate it. So for us, we spent, 5 years building a very strong technical team. We spent this time building relationships with our First Nations partners, which are excellent. We've gotten to know all the vendors in this space, the drilling companies, the helicopter pilots, the camps, all the workers. We've got all those things lined up. So for us, when we looked at all the different things we have in our portfolio, how to maximize that for our shareholders, let's get JV deals done. Let's get all these projects getting work. Let's get money being spent on the ground, and let's make a successful discovery. For us, the big home run for our shareholders, and you make that discovery hole and the share price takes off 10x, 20x. And it's been done by NextGen did it, Fission did it, ISO Energy did it, and most recently F3 did it just a couple of years ago, or just last year actually. So when that happens, it's a 10x or 20x right away. And that's the value that comes with uranium exploration. And it's exciting times. This year, we've got 7 projects that are going to be explored. We've got 4 or 5 drilling programs going on. That's over $9 to $10 million being spent in 2024 by Standard Uranium. So what a year it's going to be. We're so excited to get those drills turning, starting in about 7 to 10 days from now.
Wow. Maybe you could just kind of walk us through the active JVs. How many active JVs do you currently have?
Yeah, sure. So we have 4 on the books right now. One of them was just turned from a term sheet into a definitive agreement as of today. We announced that. So I'll start with the first one we did, and that's near Uranium City. That's our Sundog project. So we put that together with a private group, which is now being acquired by a group called Arrow Energy. Arrow Energy is led by Galen McNamara, Garrett Ainsworth, and partners on that are Dale Varan from Fortune Bay and Sean Hilliker from our team on the technical side. So those are 4 exceptional geologists in the uranium space. Those names are extremely well known to people in the space who've been around for a while. Both Galen and Garrett and Sean Hilliker all came from NextGen. They were there from the discovery all the way up to a few years ago. And then Dale Varan was the VP of exploration at Denison up until a few years ago when he went and started Fortune Bay. So the last 2 years, Standard and Fortune Bay have been up near Uranium City exploring that region. We have our Sundog project. Fortune Bay has their Mermac and Strike. Dale and I were talking for the last year and a half. Why don't we put these two companies together and create a nice little pocket around Uranium City? And then along came Galen and Garrett, and they said, why don't we put them all together and we'll get involved and we'll help be part of the technical team. And that led to the Sundog deal with Arrow Energy. So for that one, it's a 3-year option earning where they can take over 100% of that project. And what's going to happen is they're going to pay us a combination of cash and shares. We're going to operate it, and we're going to drive that company forward for the next few years. And that one's very unique. That was the first one we did, and it's unique in a special way because we wanted to, bring in Fortune Bay and bring in Garrett and Galen into that. So we that's not our typical model, but that's the first one we got across the books, and that's going to be an exciting year of exploration for our Sundog project. Now, shift to our other ones. We have 3 on the eastern side, the Atlantic, Ascent, and Canary. Those 3 projects are ones we staked about 2.5 years ago. We spent the last 2 years basically doing the groundwork, doing the boots on the ground, doing the geophysics and getting the drill ready, getting the First Nations agreement signed, getting the permits all done. So all 3 of those are ready to go this year. Once we made the transition to put these up for JV, we've been successful in getting deals done on all 3 of these projects. Now, these 3 are very similar. We will maintain 25% through the end. So our JV partners can earn up to 75% by a combination of cash and shares, work commitment in the ground, and also paying us to operate those as well. So our team will be operating all these programs, and we will have, they're roughly between $7 and $8 million each over the 3 years if the JVs work them all the way through 3 years. So for us, with the 4 of those projects, you put them all together, it's about $25 million in the ground and about another $6 to $7 million in cash and shares to us. So for Standard, what a way to get the year going, get these projects moved, get drills happening, and also fund all the G&A for our company for the next few years. The only thing we'll have to raise cash for is our flagship Davidson River. And that's pretty exciting as well.
Well, why don't you get into that project a little bit? Maybe you could explain, obviously you've explained where it's located. When I was reviewing your pitch deck and website and stuff in preparation for this interview, you seem to be smack dab right between, obviously between sort of fission and next gen, pretty unique sort of ground. Maybe you could kind of explain the original sort of, you got it from Jody, he vented it in. Now what have you done with the project since then?
Yeah, great. So we acquired it from Jody at the end of 2017, right into 2018 and 2019. It was all geophysics and boots on the ground, really trying to identify the whole idea in that part of the world. What we're trying to do is duplicate what NextGen did. It's make a high grade basement hosted uranium discovery here. And in this part of the world, those two deposits you spoke about, NextGen's Arrow and Fission's Triple R, they both sit right on the Patterson Lake conductor. And that conductor travels from the northeast, southwest, and it runs right through our Davidson River project. But what is believed to be the source of that uranium potentially is the Clearwater Domain intrusion, which came up and divided the projects on the east and the west. So Fission's Triple R and NextGen's Arrow sit on the eastern side of the Clearwater Domain, and all the Davidson River projects on the western side. So for us, we had this thing we called the mirror theory, the Clearwater Domain mirror theory, where we believe that if that uranium came up and fluids came up and deposited on the eastern side, there's a really good chance it deposited fluids on the western side. And that's where the Davidson River sits. So what we needed to do was do the exploration work to figure out, first of all, if there's going to be the host rocks that could host that type of deposit. So that's what the geophysics was for. We wanted to find these conductors, which we call them. These conductors are sort of fluid highways with sulfurs and graphites. That's where the uranium mixes and drops and makes a deposit. So look, we spent a lot of time doing the geophysics. We identified 26 conductors with 4 major conductors running through our project. We got to 2020 and it was time to start drilling. So we brought on Sean Hilliker, who came to us from NextGen, a guy who knew the rocks at NextGen's Arrow deposit about as good as anybody in the world. He actually just finished writing his master's degree on the Arrow deposit. So this guy has an intense amount of knowledge on the space, on the rocks in this area. So having Sean come over and joining Neil McCallum, looking at these drill programs was remarkable. So we started drilling in 2020. we started drilling in these conductors. Over the next few years, we did a number of, like it was 5 drill programs, winter and summer, and we got almost 40 holes there, 16,000 meters of drilling, and we've just scratched the surface. So Davidson River has got over 70 kilometers of strike length on those conductors. We've got over 150 probably targets that Sean and the team have identified. So there's a lot of drilling to be done. But just in the last year, something that was really unique and pretty interesting to us was F3 made their JR zone discovery just to the north of us. So the JR zone also was on the western side of that Clearwater domain. So it also proved out our theory that there is high-grade deposits sitting on the western side of the Clearwater domain. And we just need to vector in and keep on drilling until we make a discovery ourselves. And that's what the team's doing. We've got all these drill programs planned. We've partnered with a group called Gold Spot Discoveries, who have some AI technology. They've been, analyzing all the data from all the projects in that region, laying that on top of our own work by our own geologists, and we're using that data to go out and drill it this summer again. So we can't wait to get there and get the drills turning again and sort of follow up on some high priority targets for this summer. So it's an exciting time to watch us go back and drill Davidson River again.
Excellent. Sounds like you have a lot on the go, both yourself as well as your active JVs. Maybe we could switch gears for a moment. We'll talk some cap table financial side of things. What's your cap table kind of look like? How many shares are outstanding? Can you give us a brief summary of that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a pretty interesting question to ask because we talk about this with shareholders all the time. Some people really get upset about not high numbers. Some people don't care. Depends who you talk to. So the cap table right now, we have 230 million shares outstanding. To my own personal, it's a bit high for my liking, but some guys just don't care. Look at the Australians; they're a billion shares out. But a lot of the people in the capital markets, at least in North America and Canada, like to see those numbers lower. So we'll see where that takes us down the road. Of those 230 million, we've also got probably about 60 million warrants out there and a number of options as well. So when you look at fully diluted, the number is just over 300 million shares fully diluted.
And how much of that would be sort of like insider ownership? And do you believe that insider ownership aligns with the interest of management and shareholders?
Yeah, that's a great question. We like to see that as well. When we started this company, I think we went public with about 45 million shares out. And at that point, I think we had 40% of the company was owned by a combination of management and directors and inside seed round shareholders and Jody DeRouge as well, who've ended in the Davidson River project. So as we've continued to explore over the last 5 years, there's been dilution, obviously. And I think the number is now probably down below 12% with these shareholders of insiders, key shareholders, and management and directors. So look, can we expect our management and directors to continue to fund every program? We try. I participated in almost every capital raise. I've probably invested over 250 grand of my own money in the company over the last number of years. So look, it is what it is. We're working hard to continue to drive value and add in when we can. We'll leave it at that.
In terms of strategic shareholders, do you have any institutional shareholders or any that you're able to speak about?
Sure. One of the strategies we had from the start was to try to find some uranium-specific fund managers globally that we could tell the story to and get them invested in Standard Uranium. The first one that I approached was a guy by the name of Mike Alkin out of New York. He ran a fund called Sachem Cove, which he still runs. Mike is very well known and respected in the industry. We brought him over, spoke with him, showed him the projects, met him, introduced him to our team, and we got him invested when we were still private. So that would have been around 2018 and 2019. Mike's participated in several of our capital raises, including the one we just closed in December. So Mike and Sachem Cove and the team there are, really excellent guys. They know the space well, and they're great shareholders to have. On top of that, we went to see an individual by the name of a Guy Keller from Tribeca Fund in Australia. He's been participated in a couple rounds over the years. Marcelo Lopez and runs a company out of Australia as well. He's been participating. He hasn't been around for the last couple of years. He's kind of gone quiet, but we hope to reconnect with him. Outside of that, we brought in a number of Canadian institutional funds, primarily flow-through funds out of Canada, which you can see on our registry. One of the things we're trying to do now is sort of get longer-term shareholders in as well from the U.S., from Australia, from the U.K., ones who participate potentially in charity flow-through or just hard dollar amounts to sort of get those stickier shareholders that'll stick around longer. So that's one of the focus of the company right now.
How much capital do you have, and will you need to complete a raise within the next 6 months in order to fund your own drilling?
Yeah, so we have about 1.1 million right now in cash. We have cash coming in from our JV partners, cash payments as well as share payments, as well as being paid to be the operator fee. So we get paid 10% to be the operator on all exploration work being done. So that cash flow will be coming in. We also have the ability to bring in some warrants if our share price gets a couple pennies higher. So we could see a few $1 million coming in through warrants. Outside of that, we've got a drill program at Davidson River planned for the summer in August, September. That's going to be about $2.5 to $3 million. So there's a chance as we get to the spring, summer, and the markets are buoyant, we'll probably go back and raise a bit more, and it'll just be focused on the Davidson River project. All our other projects will be funded by our JV partners, which will cover our G&A for the year as well. So we can look forward to us having a real healthy balance sheet for 2024.
Great. And maybe we'll sort of wrap things up here. Maybe you could give a bit of a viewpoint into like your personal leadership philosophy. How would you describe it? Who sort of influenced you, and who do you sort of take after?
That's a good question. I can tell you one thing. If you're going to be in the junior exploration side of the world and working in this space, you've got to be persistent. You've got to continue to drive, come to work and put your boots on every day and work really hard. One of the things that I really, pride myself on with my own team is you've got to be honest with them. You've got to be transparent. You've got to tell them what's going on, give them as much information as you can, communicate well with your own team and with your communication efforts across your marketing. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like when we started running Standard as a private company, it's one thing to run a business. That's a lot of stuff goes into that. And then when you become a public company, and all of a sudden you're running that, and it's like you're running two parallel businesses. So it's a lot that goes into running a public company compared to a private one. You've got to constantly be marketing. You've got to be dealing with your registry, all the exchanges, shareholders. It's a lot that keeps a CEO fairly busy.
Yeah, I like to call it like a treadmill factory. You're on a treadmill and it never stops. The only thing that happens is the speed either increases or decreases depending on the cycle of things and the success on the drill stick. But with that, what's a typical sort of day look like for you? Do you ever get out to the field, or what sort of tasks and things are you most focused on in your typical day?
Yeah, so I think you're probably pretty aware in the junior markets, there's no typical day. Every day is different, but I like to divide it into, when there's exploration happening and when there's not exploration happening. So we're going to start exploring in the next couple of weeks. The drills will be turning, and this is going to be our busiest year by far. We're going to be having drills turning from the end of February all the way to the end of October. So look, do I travel a lot? Yes. My wife will tell me that I'm on the road 70% of the year. I go to every exploration program. I'm there, boots on the ground with my team. I'm constantly on the road marketing, doing interviews, going to meet key shareholders, convince, those fund managers and shareholders why we're a good company to invest with. Try to get out on the marketing. We do a couple conferences, not too many, but there's always road shows. We tie in with those. And then you've got your day-to-day stuff. So, I talk about, what people ask me, what does a CEO do? What's a typical day, or what is the things you try to focus on? So for me as a CEO, number one thing is you are the guy or the woman driving the bus. You're the one leading the way. People look to you to sort of see what's going on. They sort of see what's happening with the company, and I'm always constantly talking about it. So that's number one. Number two, raising capital. All these companies need capital to survive, and if you're not raising capital, the company sinks. So constantly I'm talking to shareholders, always preparing for the next capital raise, always preparing for explaining how we're spending that money, and then always lining up those shareholders and fund managers for when we need to bring money in for the next capital raise. So that's the second thing. Number three, I'm driving the bus. I've got to fill that bus with good people. So I've got to build my team out. And we've done that with Standard. We've got, 4 geologists, our president and VP of exploration, Sean Hilliker. He drives the technical side. He's added on 3 internal geologists, Randy, Mason, and Ezra. They are remarkable geologists in-house. So that drives that team. And then we've got our financial team. We've got Sean McGraw, our CFO. We've got a board of directors of 6 people, which we haven't even talked about. Mike Young came to us. He was the CEO of Vimy Resources in Australia for 8 years, a remarkable resource in the uranium space. We've got Ken Judge and Blair Jordan. They sit on our audit committee and our compensation committee. Both these guys are corporate lawyers. Ken specializes in M&A activity, and Blair's gone into the corporate market as well. He was an ex-banker as well. And then we've got Zoya Sheskova, a Kazakhstani native who is also on the financial side. She's great to have in our audit committee. And then Neil McCallum. Neil's been with us from day one. He's one of Daruge's top geologists, and he's a uranium and lithium expert. So remarkable board of directors. And then we have a back-end office supplied by a group called the Sentinel Group in Vancouver. So it's quite a good group. And, just driving that bus and keeping all those people going, keeping them motivated, keeping them excited about being part of the Standard team. That's a third part of my job. Now, the fourth part I like to look at is relationship building with everybody else in the industry. So we've got to have good relationships with our legals, with our securities commission people, with all the vendors we work with. And that includes like the drillers, the helicopter guys, all the camps. We've got to work with our First Nations partners. We've got remarkable relationships with them. We've got everyone from the capital markets side to the industry side. I've got to manage all those relationships, and I've got good people on my team helping me with that. Now, what comes next? Look, you've got to be knowledgeable in this space. Now, when you're in the mining space, typically you have to understand your own sector, understand uranium. How do we get it out of the ground? What's the process? But on top of that, you have to understand the complete nuclear fuel cycle. And how does that work? Because people always ask me about nuclear reactors. They want to know about, how does it go from being in the ground? Let's get to that next.
Would you mind getting into that and tell us about the nuclear fuel cycle?
Yeah, I'll get into that one right next. So after I get, that side of the business, the other thing I've got to do is be marketing and be selling people, telling the story, be out there telling the story, doing the interviews, going to the shows, constantly doing podcasts, doing interviews. That's a big part of it, telling the story. It's great if you have a great project and you're having success on the ground, but if you don't tell anyone, your share price is not going to move. So a big part of my job is being the guy out there telling the story. And then, of course, industry knowledge. You've got to be learning all the time. So my morning starts off every day with getting onto the internet, reading about the new stories, what's happened in the space, what's going on in the overall stock market. And so it's a constant supply of information coming in. So let's go back to the nuclear fuel cycle. This was probably the hardest thing that I had to pick up when I got into this space, because it is extremely complex. On the nuclear fuel cycles, let's start off with exploration. That's us. First thing you do is you get into the things I talked about today. You've got to go out, you've got to get a project, and you've got to explore it and make a discovery. That's the exploration side. Once you make a discovery, you've got to actually get it out of the ground with a mine. So you build a mine and you have a mill that comes out of the ground as a rock. It goes from the mine into a mill where it's turned into like a yellow cake, a powder. From there, it gets sent to another facility somewhere in the world where that powder is turned into a gas. So it's converted from a powder to a gas. From there, it goes to another part, an enrichment facility, where they take that gas and they spin it and then hydrate it so it's enriched. Now you've got enriched uranium. And from there, they take it to another facility where they take that and they turn it back into a solid, and they put it into, they start to build those nuclear fuel rods, which go to a nuclear reactor. So those nuclear fuel rods then get individually designed for every nuclear reactor it goes to, and that gets sent off to a nuclear reactor where it begins its life producing energy. And typically those are in the reactors for a couple years, and they have to get swapped out, and then it's moved on again. So getting that uranium out of the ground, actually all the way through that fuel cycle into a nuclear reactor, it's about a 2-year process. And when people say, why don't you just do it faster? Why don't you just build another mine? It doesn't work that way. It's one of the most complex industries, and of course, heavily regulated for safety. And it's a remarkable industry. And I just love it because there's so much to it. And people are really starting to understand now where nuclear is headed and how the future could be, clean energy with the power of nuclear reactors. So I'm really excited about where we're going.
Well, thank you for the overview on that. Maybe we could sort of wrap up here. What sort of catalyst do you have, that shareholders and prospective shareholders could expect over the next 6 months?
Well, drilling is the biggest thing. Like, shareholders want to see companies out there exploring and spending money in the ground, and that's what we're doing. So starting by the end of this month in February, we're going to have our first drill program going on our Atlantic project. So that's going to take us basically all through the month of March. And then we'll have a little bit of spring breakup. And as soon as that snow's gone, we'll start a second drill program on our Canary project. That's going to start in May. That's about a 5 or 6 week project. We'll be drilling that one. From Canary, we go right into our Ascent project. That'll be starting in probably early June. That'll go through June. And then when we get into July and August, we've got our Sundog project and our Davidson River project. So those are going to kind of go parallel. We haven't got the details worked out yet, which ones are going to start first. but Sundog near Uranium City with Arrow Energy, and then Davidson River, our flagship in the southwest corner. Those will be going, starting July all the way through to end of September, early October. So lots of drilling, lots of news flow, lots of videos being produced from site. One of the things we do quite well as a company, I'm pretty proud of, is we have our own in-house videographer and our own social media people, our in-house IR people. We go out to all our sites. We create these little videos showing investors what's going on day to day. And we post those on the internet, post them on social media, and people just love seeing those and seeing what's actually going on. So our investors can see what we're actually doing, how we're spending the money, and how the drill programs are going.
So if I'm not mistaken, is that 5 projects that could see drilling in 2024?
That is correct. 4 of them JV funded 100%, and 1 of them Davidson River funded by ourselves. We plan to be drilling 5 programs and exploring on top of that our Corvo and Rocus through geophysics and some boots on the ground stuff as well. So 7 projects exploring, 5 drill programs.
Wow, that's a busy season. Good for you. Should provide lots of potential catalysts. Hey, Jon, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Is there anything that I sort of missed that maybe we should touch on? Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think it's a really good time to do this interview with you and get to know you a bit better, Kier, and really share our story with your audience. I mean, for us, the nuclear industry is taking off. Uranium is really hot right now, and investors really need to understand if they're going to be investing in the uranium space. They should start to understand what's going on, who are the people they want to be following, and what kind of stories do they want to hear. What are the catalysts, and what should they be looking for? There's going to be a swarm of new companies flowing into the Athabasca Basin, the hottest part in the entire globe for uranium exploration. Investors should do their research and figure out, okay, does a technical team have any experience actually in uranium or in Saskatchewan? That's crucial. Do they have projects that actually have potential to be home runs? That's incredible as well. Do they have relationships with vendors? Do they have First Nations agreements in place? Can they actually execute a drill program this year? We're going to hit it out of the park with 5 drill programs, 7 exploration programs. If you can find another company doing that, good luck, because it's a remarkable accomplishment. I'm really proud of our team, and I can't wait to get those drills spinning this year.
Yeah, well, I guess I got my taste of uranium from the investor relations side back in 2006, doing Labrador Central Mineral Belt stuff. And there was a little company named Hathor, which was in the Athabasca Basin, that obviously went on to make a pretty phenomenal sort of discovery and ended up getting bought out. But the Central Mineral Belt, I see it sort of back on the map. A few companies have projects there, but I would say in terms of like grade, scale, infrastructure, you really got to be in the Athabasca Basin in Canada. If you're really going to make a dent in this or have a viable sort of project. Even, looking at NextGen, which has had a viable project for some time, it's going to be quite a bit of time before they come online with all of the infrastructure that they have to build, which could benefit others in the region. So anyways, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for walking us through a few of those points. We look forward to having you on again here in the next maybe after you get a couple drill programs done. We'll see what sort of results you've got. We could get a bit of an update for the audience, but I thank you for your time, and look forward to following your story along closely.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share our story. I'd also, I suggest in the future, after we get some drill results, to get my president VPX, Sean Hilliker, to come on and talk about that. He is a remarkable guy. He really knows how to tell his story to investors so they can understand what we're doing there, and he can break down the technical details of each drill program, what's exciting about what's going on. So I look forward to with him sharing that with you again, Kier.
Excellent. Well, you have yourself a great rest of the day there, Jon.